Welcome to The Breakdown, where we delve into important topics of the day with allegiance only to reason, evidence, and a willingness to consider new ideas and concepts with an open mind. I'm James Sayer, your host. Tonight, it's all about the 2020 elections. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. So, let's just jump right down the wormhole and get into it. It's November 20th, 2020. That's 17 days since Election Day, and Joe Biden has decisively won 306 electoral votes in the U.S. presidential election, though these results have not been officially certified by all the states yet. Biden currently has won nearly 6 million popular votes more than Donald Trump, and is now the president-elect, set to be sworn in as the next U.S. president on January 20th, 2021. It's also Joe Biden's birthday today, so happy birthday, President-elect. Happy number 78. Kamala Harris will be the first U.S. female vice president and also the first African-American and also the first Asian-American vice president. The Democrats retained a narrow majority in the House, but actually had a net loss of 9 seats and gained only 1 seat in the Senate, leaving them 3 votes shy of the Senate majority that they had so hoped for. The Republicans currently hold 50 seats in the Senate. They lost 1 Senate seat in the election, and while still in the minority in the House, they managed to pick up those 9 seats from the Democrats. Now, with 2 Georgia Senate runoff elections scheduled for January, this special election will ultimately decide who will control the Senate, and you can bet it's going to be intense. President Trump and many of his followers continue, however, to deny the results of the presidential election and to claim voter fraud, thus far without any credible evidence. Now, already dozens of President Trump's 30 to 40 court challenges against the vote count have been dismissed. Now, for example, here's another thing. In Erie, Pennsylvania, a postal worker's claim of fraudulent backdating of ballots at the post office has been discredited by numerous holes in his account and changes that he's repeatedly made to his story. Now, this is according to numerous news outlets, as well as factcheck.org, the fact-checking watchdog. Now, these allegations ultimately involved concerning the Erie, Pennsylvania postal worker. The ballots were so few that it wouldn't have even affected the election's outcome anyway. So there was another situation, an anonymous Michigan postal worker's claim of fraudulent backdating of ballots, which is being investigated, but is actually also irrelevant because Michigan does not accept ballots after the election day. And so any ballots received after election day just could not affect the outcome of the race. Now, numerous claims made by the Trump administration of voter fraud in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada have also fallen apart. In fact, the only real evidence so far of voter fraud appears to be from Trump and his supporters. In Nevada, according to numerous news outlets, a woman actually attempted to vote twice for Donald Trump. And in Philadelphia, 2 armed Trump/QAnon supporters attempted to perform an unlawful investigation of unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud at the Philly Convention Center. And Donald Trump and the GOP have effectively tried to defraud many mail-in voters of their votes by attempting to have mail-in ballots thrown out of the count, or by making drastic cuts to the postal service in swing states to destroy their ability to deliver mail-in ballots on time. Because most mail-in voters tend to be Democratic, though not all, which means that Trump is actually willing to defraud some Republican and independent voters of their votes as well, in order to block the Democratic mail-in votes. How about that? Nonetheless, according to a wide range of reports from election observers, state election officials, and the Department of Homeland Security, no patterns of voter fraud in the election were detected, and many election security experts concluded that this election has been one of the smoothest and most secure in many years, even with over 150 million Americans voting, and a projected record voter turnout now of 67%, which has not been seen in over 100 years. So, that's the quick overview. But what are the real takeaways from this crazy election, which election officials and workers ironically ran so smoothly, but whose results Trump and many of his supporters just refuse to accept? Okay, here they are. First off, the election officials, election security experts, poll workers, and postal workers appear to have brought their A game. The elections, by most accounts, were actually run quite smoothly, and the violence feared around Election Day did not materialize, save a few incidents like Trump supporters running a Biden campaign bus off the road or threatening robocalls being sent to black voters in states like New York, Ohio, and Michigan. And these accounts are according to the Post, The Hill, Politico, and many other news outlets. But even though Trump and his Postmaster General did their best to weaken U.S. Postal Service deliveries in swing states through overtime cuts, budget cuts, and removal of mail sorting equipment, plus blocking $25 billion in stimulus funding for the agency, the Postal Service was still able to deliver the necessary ballots for a Trump defeat. Now, the foreign interference during the actual election appears minimal to non-existent, though there were serious efforts at interference and disinformation leading up to the election. But probably no need to actually try and do anything this election. Their well-established work of division and disinformation already successful long ago. So, thank you, election workers, for doing such a demanding and thankless task. Thank you, postal workers, for working so hard under such difficult conditions. And thanks to all other election and security professionals who made this election successful. So successful. The system works best when we all chip in and do our best. And that's what you did. Democracy depends on the integrity of its participants. And you came through. You came through for all of us. So truly, thank you. Now, Joe Biden was the right candidate. He was the right candidate to run. And Kamala Harris was the right VP choice to run. See, Joe Biden was, believe it or not, the best possible candidate of all to run against Donald Trump at this point in time. You see, Biden's good nature endeared him to many voters, and he was largely inoculated for his gaffe-prone ways by running against a president who is the grand master of the long, uninterrupted gaffe that just never really ends. So compared to Trump's constant stream of falsehoods and embarrassing remarks, a misspoken word or an unwanted Biden shoulder massage is virtually nothing by any comparison. Joe's a solid liberal, but he's willing to negotiate and compromise to get things done. And he's a guy with a kind, reasonable, and humble approach that appeals to many voters. Indeed, many swing voters who broke for him in this election. Now, he offered more of more moderate policy prescriptions for our country's problems compared to that of those of Bernie Sanders, whose embrace of democratic socialism would have certainly doomed him in the general election against Trump. Now, Kamala Harris is a highly intelligent, competent, and professional politician, and while a solid liberal, having been the Attorney General in California and a prosecutor in San Francisco, she is far from a radical, and she is more than sufficiently satisfied all those that were demanding a female vice president of color. So, plus, she's also young enough to assuage voters of concerns over Biden's age. So for all those reasons, she was an excellent choice. Now, Biden actually won back Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and he flipped Arizona by about 10,000 votes. The last time that Arizona went for a Democrat was in 1996, and before that it was actually in 1948 for Truman. Previously, in a previous podcast, I had incorrectly stated that perhaps Arizona had never voted for a Democrat, but obviously that was a mistake, so my apologies. Anyway, also talking about Georgia, which had their recount, which concluded and determined, certified that Biden's the winner, that was by 12,000 votes. And the last time Georgia went for a Democrat, that was in 92 with Bill Clinton. Now, Texas is even becoming competitive now. Now, Biden lost Texas by 5.5%. And usually Democrats, pretty much get blown away there. See, in the last election, Hillary lost by 9%. And 2012, Obama lost by 16%. So you can see Democrats are actually gradually wearing down the conservative resistance. They're wearing them down in these areas. The electoral map is clearly shifting as cities in the South and West are growing and attracting more diverse workforces and more liberal residents to places like Atlanta, Austin, Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, Tucson. These demographics change, and the votes change. Now, radical policies, or what we'll say policies that are viewed as radical policies in the United States, but not necessarily considered radical in Europe or other advanced nations. But these policies, these so-called radical policies that were associated with Democrats, hurt them in many swing districts in this election. Many moderate Democrats from swing districts lost their re-election bids due to what was a perceived radical message. That it was a message that voters, I'm not saying it was radical, but voters perceived the message in many respects to be radical. Now, was it radical? No, not really. It wasn't. But some of the ideas that were pushed by progressive activists and politicians, like defund the police, or the book like In Defense of Looting, and ideas like make all college free, and extreme government takeover plans like Medicare for all and the Green New Deal, along with the increasing penchant for excessive woke activist shaming or canceling, which so many find off-putting, basically annoying PC people on steroids. These things pushed a lot of people away from Democrats. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some really good ideas included in a lot of these proposals and in a lot of progressive ideas. But they also involve a lot of huge government programs that would require large government interventions into the economy and significant increases in taxation, especially for the wealthy, of course. But actually, many non-wealthy voters think they're going to be rich someday in the United States. And they're anti-tax. They take an anti-tax position because they don't want to pay that much in taxes when their turn comes, when the millions come in. Though they usually, that rarely happens. But Americans historically are famously suspicious of any government and have been since the founding, let alone big government. And we have a well-established distaste for taxes also since the founding. As any serious analysis of public opinion polling and electoral results will show you over many decades of U.S. elections. So also, think of this. Americans really do love their free speech, and we know this. And they resent being monitored and being pressured to censor themselves in order to please certain protected groups, even if it may be the kind and sensitive and even, the right thing to do. Americans still want to be able to speak their mind, even if it is a little rude or insulting. They want to have that freedom to be able to do it. They don't like feeling like they've got somebody, right over their shoulder censoring them. Americans still do identify as more conservative than liberal in this country, and they pretty much always have. And trying to pull them too far to the left too fast is definitely a big mistake. So remember this. Go hard, Democrats, go hard left with American voters in 2020, okay? And you will see a big red wave in 2022. Now, polling estimates. We need to talk about this. Polling estimates for this election were off again. They were off, but actually pretty close to their national historical average of about 4%, being 4% off. They just seem more inaccurate because the polls in 2018 were unusually accurate. Now, the polls were much further off in certain states and regions for this election, like in Miami-Dade County, Florida, southern Texas, and rural parts of Michigan and Wisconsin. Many pollsters and polling analysts, including Nate Silver, with 538, say that in 2016, a large part of the inaccuracies in state polls for that election was because they didn't properly weight the surveys for non-college educated voters, which led to a Trump Republican undercount in the polling. Now, pollsters make these weighting adjustments for certain demographic groups, like white, non-college educated men, because they tend to respond to polling surveys at a much lower rate than most other demographics. Now, pollsters made the weighting adjustments. They made them this year in 2020, but the polling was still off, way off in these certain areas that I mentioned. So why? Why is that? Well, here is one very strong possibility. According to pollster David Hill with Hill Research Consultants, who has an excellent article in the Washington Post today titled "The Dirty Little Secret That Every Pollster Needs to Own Up to," Hill says that the problem is we're not getting accurate random samples of the voting population anymore because people have become increasingly unresponsive to phone surveys since the advent of caller ID, which happened back in the 80s, and the widespread use of answering machines and now voicemail. So, where Harris used to be able to get one survey completed for every 5 attempts, now it takes about 100 attempts to get one polling survey completed. And since we don't have representative random samples of the population, our so-called margins of error are actually meaningless. We really don't know what the true margins of error are without a proper random sample. So people who are completing the phone surveys are what Harris calls samples of the willing. Yes, you see, there are certain types of people who are much more likely or willing to respond to surveys, like progressives and women, and those highly engaged with politics, for example. And others who are much less likely to respond to surveys, like many conservatives, white men without college degrees, and older men. So, to get an accurate read on the true feelings of the voting population, pollsters are going to have to find some new innovative ways to improve their sampling of the entire population that finds a way to include a well-balanced random sample of voters for proper statistical analysis. Now, some have suggested using more online polling in place of phone calls. But Harris points out that most online polling does not use random samples of the population, but pre-recruited panels of voters who signed up for the survey based on some incentive. Now, that's a major selection bias problem there. So also, voters often tend to rush through online surveys and they don't think about their answers as long as they do when they're on the phone. So, and additionally, also, pollsters can't verify whether respondents are actually registered to vote or not when they're on the computer, when they do the survey online. So those are the serious downsides to online polling. Now, Harris does offer an interesting idea of texting interview requests to genuine random samples of people on the voter rolls. Now, this may help, but it seems to me that voters who don't want to answer phone surveys are not going to reply to a survey text either. But maybe I'm wrong. It is a clever idea that's worth a try. Harris also states that in the meantime, while we are still using these sketchy survey samples, that we also publish, that we also go and publish the cooperation rate of demographic groups along with the demographic weighting that is used to provide greater clarity and understanding about the data and survey population. So this additional information about the cooperation rate, basically the response rate of different demographic groups, that provides us with more meaning, more context for us to understand the results a little more accurately. That does make a difference when you're looking at information. It's like, well, look at this group. We're surveying this group. You can see the difference. This group, we got 150 responses. This other group, we got 10, right? So that gives you additional context to know you didn't get nearly as many, you don't have as accurate a read from those 10 people as you did from those 150. So anyway, whatever the case, ultimately, what we're talking about here is that the problem of how do you survey people? How do you survey people who don't want to be surveyed? Is that even possible? Now, that's a unique challenge, not likely to be resolved anytime soon. Now, this is a fascinating topic, which we may revisit in a later episode. We'll look forward to discussing this. Perhaps there's new weighting formulas that we can come up with to make certain formulaic adjustments to the polling formulas that might help make things more accurate. But ultimately, it seems like we've got to find some way to come up with accurate random samples, or we're doomed to inaccurate polling. So anyway, next topic. The majority, that's 51% of U.S. voters, repudiated Trump, but 47% said 4 more years of that guy. And the country and the government is, sharply divided. This has been especially disturbing for liberals to see that 47% of voters would actually choose Trump despite all the disqualifying things he's done in the past 4 years. The majority of voters wanted Trump out, but are still, a little more than apprehensive about giving all the keys of power over to the Democrats just yet. So Democrats are going to have to win a lot more people over to their side if they wish to accomplish even a portion of their political goals in this country. They're going to have to manage a diverse set of constituencies and communicate very clearly with these different groups about their needs and issues and what they're doing to help, and to do so in a simple, straightforward manner that doesn't come off as pretentious to many conservative voters. Now, I'm not saying be fake down home. No, definitely not. Nothing worse than that. Better to just be the raging progressive you are than try and pretend you're someone you're not. So what I'm saying is speak in simple, clear terms in a straightforward and respectful way. You be straight and real with people, and that means something very valuable. That makes you special, because most people don't do that. Not because they don't want to necessarily, but because people get busy or distracted or tired or nervous, right? But you see, that's something that you have to do. And if the Democratic Party can just get out there and have real discussions and listen, just listen, not judge, just listen, and do a really good job of listening, even to some stupid comments and ideas, but just hear them out. Hear them out instead of trying to shoot them down and, correct them. Just hear them out. Listen. Listen to all these groups of people, not just your favorite constituencies, but everybody. Get out there and meet up with all those groups. Groups, think of the message it would send. Think of this, okay? What if AOC met with, Republicans that are not in her constituency? I know that sounds kind of crazy, right? And it's like the wrong Republicans, you might be concerned about her safety, right? Some of these crazies, you don't know what they're going to do. But you find some well-behaved ones, some respectful ones, right, that don't believe in QAnon garbage, or some conservative Democrats or rural Democrats, whatever, people that aren't in her district, right? Or someone like AOC, someone like that, some liberal firebrand that people think is some socialist lunatic, and just have her come out and listen. Can you think and be cool, just relaxed and not talk down to them, right? But think of the gesture. If Democrats were to do that, and I'm not saying it will be successful and it's going to guarantee you victories, but it would mean something. And if you did it, and you did it sincerely, and you did it consistently, right? That it wasn't just a token gesture, but you legitimately made this concerted effort to hear people, whether they were your people or not. You heard them all. You heard them out. Yeah. Then you can take those successes. Once you establish that, do a really good job of listening to all good groups of people, then you'll be able to craft balanced legislation that meets the general demands of the country. Where no one, you got to be real about this, right? No one's going to get everything they want, but most everyone at least gets what they need. And then you can take those successes from your listening and compromising, and you can build from there. Yeah. Democrats, do it. Now, Trump's and his supporters' refusal to acknowledge the election results is as unsurprising as it is indefensible. Now, Trump has made a career of pretending and maintaining a facade, which is his defense now, to just deny he lost, despite overwhelming proof of a Biden victory. Trump is essentially pouting and waiting in his room for us to come in and allow him to come back out and play president for 4 more years. He hates losing, and he never admits losing, never admits being wrong or apologizing. Actually, never apologizing is a true sign of weakness. Yes, and by his external behavior, he is a man-child who wants only to be spoiled and praised, and shows no interest in the complicated details of policymaking. He wants unconditional support and obedience, and in return, he will give you whatever you most desire. 3 Supreme Court seats, tax cuts, deregulation, build the wall, cage the immigrants, defend Christmas, insult Europeans, you name it. There's always some payoff for your complicity in his crimes. He pays you to look the other way every time he does wrong, and it's worked, up until now. But enough voters were willing to stop him this time. Though clearly not enough. clearly not enough already to give Democrats a united government, which should be our key takeaway here from the Democrats' net loss of 9 House seats and failing to retake the Senate. So, okay, moving on. Trump won men by 8%, but he lost the minority vote, but he saw gains with Latinos, especially in Miami-Dade County, Florida, and South Texas. 1/3 of Latinos voting for Trump. Asians who supported Biden by and large, but Trump improved his numbers with Asians by 7%. Trump improved his numbers with black men by 6%. Republicans' support increased an additional 6%. And those making over $100,000 a year, their support for Trump increased 7%. 30 to 44-year-olds, their support for Trump increased by 6%. So there's a lot of different groups in this country. It's not all just a bunch of white rural racists, right? And I'm not saying rural people are all racist. I know better. I know that's not true, right? And I know a lot of Republicans aren't racist. But I also know there's a lot of Republicans that are tolerating it. They're putting up with it. They're considering that somehow the lesser of two evils to having Democrats in power. I understand you don't like Democrats. I understand you have concerns about excessive government regulation and taxation. But that is not a comparative evil next to racism. Okay? Reality check. Now Biden won women by 15%, and he gained among independents by 12%. He gained with moderates by 12%, and even gained with white men, who Trump won, but Biden improved with white men by 7%. And Biden improved with Catholics by 6%. And Biden improved with the middle class as well. What we're saying is middle class is 50,000 to 100,000. He improved by 11%. Biden got 11%. When I say improved, I'm saying improved over Hillary from the 2016 election. Now, many groups were crucial to Biden's victory. No one group can claim responsibility, though many have tried. Some say it was women, or suburban women, or black women, or the youth turnout. Others say it was the moderates and swing voters, and the shift towards Biden from white men. Well, they're all right. It was all of them together that voted Trump out, and it took everyone to do it. Had only about 45,000 votes or so between Wisconsin, Nevada, and Georgia gone the other way, Trump could have won a second term. So thanks for another nail-biter, Electoral College. See, in this deeply divided country, Democrats cannot afford to credit or favor any one group over another. They needed them all to beat Trump, and are going to need them all if they hope to keep the House in 2022 and possibly retake the Senate in January. Now that's a long shot, though certainly not impossible. Or they're gonna have to find a way. One way or they're going to have to. They're going to have to find a way to work out compromises with the few remaining moderate GOP senators that do exist. Democrats' message must have wide appeal to be able to pass legislation in a divided Congress and a sharply divided country, and to secure the votes needed to win the presidency within the Electoral College. Now, Trump probably could have won the re-election if he had handled COVID-19 better, but he didn't. He blew it. He blew it big time, about as bad as you can blow it. Like as bad as Hoover blew the Depression, maybe worse. Maybe worse. That's a debate we'll save for another time. But anyway, he won 47% of the vote, even with his poor coronavirus response. So if he had done it right, he would have won that second term. He could have won. It just turns out that knowing how to run the machinery of government matters. It's important. Now, schemes to stop electors from choosing Biden on December 14th are virtually certain to fail. There is no credible legal way to prevent Biden from the presidency, but they will try. A Georgia recount was completed yesterday, and Biden has been certified the winner in Georgia. Trump lost that recount by a little over 12,000 votes. And Trump is trying to get Wisconsin to do a recount now in an attempt to have those votes that he claims without evidence are fraudulent. He wants those thrown out. And he has hosted today 2 Republican leaders from Michigan at the White House regarding 2 GOP election workers who attempted to rescind their certification of votes for Wayne County, which contains the Democratic city of Detroit, in an attempt to find a way to deny Biden a victory he won in Michigan by over 155,000 votes. Trump's already done 30 to 40 lawsuits already, so he's just throwing stuff against the wall at this point to see what sticks. And nothing really has yet. Trump would need to have electoral votes from 3 states to 3 states. 3 states that went for Biden. He would need to have those 3 states thrown out and awarded to Trump instead for Trump to claim victory. Or get the results reversed for Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin to have an electoral tie at 269 each. That could happen. Where the election would go to the House of Representatives, where each state delegation gets 1 vote, and where Republicans have a majority of state delegations. Trump could then be elected president by the House of Representatives. But with no credible accounts of voter fraud whatsoever, and vote margins for a Biden victory above 10,000 people in all of the close battleground states, and Georgia already having certified Biden as the winner, none of that's going to happen. Some of Trump's supporters, including Rudy Giuliani, are trying to have the votes contested and certification of those votes delayed long enough to have the GOP state legislatures select the electors instead of having, awarding the electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote within their state. Now, each state already has passed laws that delegate this power to voters and appoint electors for whichever candidate wins the state by popular vote on election day. Federal law does not allow state legislators to take this extreme measure unless it declares that the popular vote failed to make a choice. And there is no such evidence at all of this in any state in this election. Now, most importantly, state GOP leaders in Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin have already said they will not intervene in the selection of electors, which would essentially be against both federal and their state laws, and electors will be awarded for Joe Biden, the winner of the popular vote in their states. The Biden electors simply need to meet on Monday, December 14th, and send their electoral votes to Congress. Should an electoral question arise, Biden very likely has at least the 50 votes necessary to win in the Senate, since there will only be 99 senators on January 6th, when the House and Senate meet for a joint special session. Now, one Georgia Senate seat will be vacant, so it'll be 48 Democrats, plus the moderate GOP senators who've already acknowledged Biden is the winner, to resolve any electoral issues that might arise. Now, if there's a dispute between the House and the Senate on electors, and somehow moderate GOP senators flaked out, Biden still wins because the governors will have certified, as they are required by federal law, they will have certified the winner of the popular vote in their state. Federal law requires that the electors certified by the state's governors are the ones to be accepted. So Biden wins again. However, if somehow, some way, certain state legislatures were to select a set of competing Trump-supporting electors and or Democratic-controlled House and GOP-controlled Senate, if the Senate House couldn't agree on which electors to accept, and there is no vote and no winner, the presidency would pass to the next person in the line of succession at the end of the Trump and Vice President Mike Pence's term on January 20th. And that person would be House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. How would you like that, Republicans? Yeah. January 20th, 2021, it's going to be President Biden. Yep, Biden is going to be the president. But Trump's recent moves are very dangerous. All right? His delaying the transition by not acknowledging Biden's victory is dangerous. It's dangerous for national security purposes, and it's dangerous for the smooth transition of government and the effective maintenance of government. Reckless withdrawals from Afghanistan. The plan is to, there's 5,000 now. He's going to drop it down to 2,500 left. All right. There's concerns about that's not going to be enough troops to maintain law and order in that country. Vindictive political firings, extremely dangerous acts of politicizing intelligence, right? And they're politicizing national security and impairing our operational readiness. And Trump's drawn this entire political process into question, encouraging others to see fraud where there is none, encouraging people to deny just basic reality and fairness, to claim victory and deny the majority of American people the president that they elected. This is authoritarianism, and it only needs enough of you to go along with it. If almost half of us are just going to stop admitting what is demonstrably true, when it is inconvenient to our purposes, our democratic republic is doomed. Democracy cannot effectively function when that many people act in bad faith. Now, there's a small chance for very limited unrest prior to, during, or even after Biden's inauguration, but the probability of a peaceful transfer of power is actually very high. Now, you better believe there will be some Proud Boy protests and some counter demonstrators who get into fights with them. And there may be some sad, desperate, violent attempts by some militia/white supremacist terrorist groups to make some sad, desperate attempt to prevent Biden from becoming president, which will almost certainly fail. The greater concern really is for the erosion of democratic norms and principles within our society. Our guardrails for democracy, our political institutions and laws must be strengthened. Some unscrupulous judges, political officials, and election officials, along with a large enough population of people willing to deny the democratic vote, could screw it all up for us. Let us make sure we put into place all the safeguards necessary to prevent this from happening. Democrats don't want the GOP to do this to us, and the GOP does not want Democrats doing it to them. And for all of us must individually and collectively hold each other accountable to fair, honest, and ethical conduct that democracy truly does require. Now, Democrats are, unsurprisingly, already fighting within their ranks. They're doing what they do best, fighting each other. There is perhaps no greater time-honored political activity in this country than Democrats fighting amongst themselves. With a wide range of different constituencies, minorities, women, the disabled, gays, non-binary and transgender people, unions, teachers, government workers, lawyers, the poor, young voters, urban Northeasterners, and a majority of college graduates. Yeah, that's a lot of different people. They have a lot of disparate groups to try to please and unite as a politically viable coalition, with historic tension between the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party, now about a third of Democratic voters, and the liberals and moderates of the Democratic Party, making up the other 2/3. It's an old argument. It's bound to be repeated a million times more. The progressives don't think the liberals and moderates are willing to go far enough, and often describe them as weak, cowardly, or uncreative. Liberals and moderates are often exasperated with progressives for being too inflammatory and insulting in their rhetoric and unrealistic in their proposals and approach. And they both have their points. Sometimes, especially in extreme situations, a bolder, larger government approach is better, like when massive, decisive action is needed, like in response to a national emergency like a global pandemic or a natural disaster, or desperately needed stimulus money to prop up a teetering economy. But most often, a more gradual, moderate approach is needed to address public policy issues and questions of politics, especially in the United States, which is still decidedly, according to many recent polls, not to mention our elections, a more conservative country than it is liberal. 34% of Americans in July of 2020 identified as conservative, down from 40% in January. So there was a drop of 6%. Some people think that's attributed to the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial justice movement, possibly. But anyway, 34% describe themselves as conservative in the United States. 26% identify as liberal or progressive. All right, and that's a big old chunk of undecideds right in there, too. All right. And this poll is according to a July 2020 Gallup poll. All right. But it is a more conservative country and has been consistently since the founding. More conservative than liberal. Yes. But progressive, liberal, or moderate Democrat, you all need each other. 47% of Americans voted for Trump, and you lost a net of 9 seats in the House, and you failed to retake the Senate. You have to work together. You have to remain respectful and collaborative and stick together no matter what. That is the only way you can win. Divided, you're easy prey for the GOP, who are eminently more disciplined about maintaining party unity and a disciplined message. Now, Democrats, you need a more moderate approach for swing states and moderate voters. And progressives need to respect that, okay? Democrats, they lost that net of 9 seats, mostly in more moderate to conservative swing districts in this election. Fox News and the GOP had an easy time using footage of rioting at protests and the horrible ideas of defund and abolish the police, ideas like Medicare for all and the Green New Deal. These ideas require massive increases in taxation, which most Americans do not support. And many Americans, not just Republicans, chafe at the excessive wokeness of this new generation of progressive who appear all too ready to just jump down your throat if you use the wrong pronoun or if you accidentally commit some unknown microaggression against a person of color. A lot of people are just put off by that and by feeling judged for every single thing that comes out of their mouth. They find it tiresome and exhausting, and I don't blame them. If someone really crosses a line and says something clearly racist or sexist, something very obviously wrong and unacceptable, fine, call them out on it. But otherwise, chill out a little bit and don't be such a high and mighty pain in the ass that no one wants to talk to. Most people don't want to hang out with people who are just waiting to bust you on saying the wrong thing. Those people are annoying, and very few people like them. I'm not trying to be mean, but if you are one of those people, give it a break. You're annoying the crap out of everybody. You want to make a point, do it with kindness. Do it as a gentle reminder. And people will be much more open to considering it. But you get all up on their face or insult them, most people with a spine anyway, they're going to push back and they're going to tell you where you can go put your wokeness. Now, you're not wrong, progressives. You're not wrong at all to advocate for your causes. You just need to do it in a more palatable fashion for the rest of the country that's a little bit more conservative than you. Most of your ideas will get much further in U.S. electoral politics with a less radical approach. And yes, the word socialism does still scare the hell out of at least half of American voters. So stop using it. Stop using socialism, democratic socialism. Forget about Marx. Focus your rhetoric more specifically on the policies themselves that will help improve Americans' lives. Practical policies that will help improve Americans' lives. And forget about Marxist ideology and class struggle. Half of Americans, they hear that stuff and they start thinking of Chairman Mao. And they no longer even hear what you're saying. So progressives, learn the language and the cultures of more conservative Americans. Seriously, the details. Learn it. Know it. Get in there. It's not easy. It's a hassle. It's complicated, but it will give you returns. If you wish to persuade people, you must do so in a way that is non-threatening, that is clear, and is easy to understand. If you can do that, if you can secure electoral majorities, then you can secure them for indefinitely. If you're willing to reach out and truly understand people and connect to them, right? And approach them in a way that is acceptable to them, right? It's not just about what you think. It's also about what other people think too, right? Because we're all in this together. And it's not just about what you think is a good idea. It's also what you can get passed in a divided House and a Senate. Bottom line, what can you get through? All right? So, anyway, learn the language and culture of more conservative Americans. And that can get you far. Now, why do I say this? Because Democrats, we do often have, and I am a Democrat. I'll admit it. I've been a lifelong Democrat my whole life. Probably knew that already, that I fall somewhere left of the spectrum politically. But I respect conservatism, and I respect conservatives. Principled conservatism. I may not agree with it, but I can respect the arguments and the positions of it, as long as it's applied honestly, intellectually and morally honest application. I have no problem with conservative principles. May not agree with them, but I respect them. Anyway, because Democrats often have most of the best and creative policy ideas, don't believe me? Well, then you show me the GOP healthcare plan, or their plan to fight climate change, or their plan to address income equality, or police reform. Oh, never mind. Yeah, they did create a toothless version of the police reform bill in the Senate this past year. But the more typical Republican response to societal problems generally is just let businesses and the powerful have their way, and everything else will just work out fine. And that usually works out for the people that are successful and get lucky. And then everyone else just, they have to take whatever's left over. But most people sense that that's not really the way to maintain a healthy, well-functioning society. Because, typically the wealthy and powerful in business, they don't regulate themselves really well. No one regulates themselves well. We all need somebody kind of keeping an eye on us a little bit. I'm not saying like right over your back or over your shoulder, but, that if you go missing, that somebody checks in on you, like later that night or the next day or something, that you're not gone for weeks. And everyone's like, well, what happened to James? But I don't know. I haven't seen him in weeks. It's like that there's somebody there kind of keeping an eye on things. That's what we're talking about here. And that's more than reasonable. All right. Most people sense that this sort of laissez-faire attitude is not really the way to maintain a healthy, well-functioning society. And a strong majority of voters can actually get behind a lot of democratic proposals if they're tailored correctly and fairly to the needs and concerns of these different constituents, all right? But you got to clearly communicate what you're going to do, what you will do, what you are doing, and then how you did it. At every step of the way, you're in clear communication with these different constituencies. And you keep those lines of communication with voters open. And that's even with your opposition too. You're communicating with your opposition too, even if you don't want to, right? Because that's how you work things out. That's how you come to agreements. That's how you develop new ideas and a new understanding. All right? Keep those lines of communication with voters open. Don't just shut them down once you pass the bills that you wanted to get passed. Establish a broader and deeper relationship with voters. And don't ever let it go. Now, Republicans and conservatives, you should fight. You should fight for the causes you believe in. But you must be willing to accept certain fundamental principles of reality and fairness. This means accepting things like the scientific fact that climate change exists and that humans are a major contributor to it. Stop pretending it's not real and use your conservative, market-oriented approach to help us find ways to fight it before it's too late. Stop pretending racism is not still a serious problem in this country when we have scores of footage of unarmed black men being killed by police, but virtually no existing footage of it happening to white men at all. And stop pretending that white supremacists are not the greatest terrorist threat our country currently faces, when the Department of Homeland Security has already confirmed, and other intelligence agencies have already confirmed that it is. And please commit to doing, yes, there are white supremacists in the Republican Party. And I don't know how many, I'm not going to try, but we know that there are a lot of white supremacist Trump supporters. All right? You cannot accept racism any longer. You cannot countenance it. You cannot use dog whistles anymore. You've encouraged it as far as you can. It is time to let it go once and for all. So stop pretending and commit to doing what it takes to make sure these dangerous groups are kept in check. Stop entertaining ridiculous conspiracy theories with no basis in reality, like QAnon and Seth Rich's murder and George Soros' diabolical plan for one world government. And when you decisively lose a presidential election with virtually zero evidence of fraud, you accept the results, just as Democrats have done when they have lost in the past, and you have done in the past up until now. If you want Democrats to accept your victories, you must accept theirs as well. And really, the whole presidential voter fraud thing is truly absurd. If the results for president were fraudulent and must be thrown out, then you have to throw out the results of the House and Senate races too. And those went pretty well for the GOP. So you can't have it both ways, folks. You invalidate the presidential votes, then you invalidate the congressional votes as well. So let's just all use some reason, common sense, and some good old-fashioned kindness and respect, and we can find a way to come to workable, practical solutions to many of our problems. So Republicans, fight against the progressive policies that you oppose, but fight the right way. If you want Democrats to behave honorably, you're going to have to hold up your end of it too. You're going to have to behave honorable as well. Now, both sides have to work on their communication and negotiation skills and dealing with each other respectfully. Our civil discourse sucks in this country. It's on life support. And we all got to dial back our rhetoric. Democrats and Republicans are political opponents, not enemies. This culture, this nonsense culture of rage, which Trump and Twitter have done so much to magnify, is a cancer which will destroy our country if we let it. All right. We are each accountable for our words and actions. So people of decency and goodwill, hold your friends, family, and co-workers to the standard which a civilized and humane society requires. Do not tolerate unnecessary unkindness or cruelty. Do not tolerate lies and deception, and do not condone a rush to judgment on others until all evidence is fully presented and weighed. Accept no excuses. Now, Georgia runoff elections in January are going to be bonkers. Don't be shocked by the insane rhetoric and even more insane amounts of money that are about to be poured into this cauldron of these two Senate runoffs in January. These elections are going to determine which party controls the Senate and what, if any, legislation Democrats will be able to get passed in both congressional chambers. So get ready, because it's going to be on. Now, evidence of malfeasance, corruption, and crime within the Trump administration should and will be investigated, and all lawbreakers brought to justice. But Democrats must pursue investigations carefully, fairly, transparently, and methodically, while avoiding a vindictive approach. It's hard to heal. It's hard to heal a nation when you're busy settling scores. Punish criminals where you find them, but the overriding focus must be on fighting COVID-19, getting the vaccines out, getting Americans the stimulus that they need to keep going, getting them back to work, and making the crucial changes needed to fix our infrastructure, our healthcare system, trade policy, and finally tackling climate change before it's too late. The focus must be on these solutions, not punishing Trump. That will come in its due time. The moderate Republicans, they're going to have some considerable power in the Senate. Democrats will likely have to win them over to get anything done. Now, there are a few GOP senators left with an independent streak, like Mitt Romney and Susan Collins, Ben Sasse, and Lisa Murkowski. These are folks who occasionally split with their party on certain issues. And these are going to be the senators for the Democrats' court if they wish to pass any legislation in the Senate. So the rest of the GOP, you can pretty much expect them to be as obstructionist as you might imagine. But if Democrats make compromises with these four senators, they can get something done. Not everything they like, but some of what they need, and that's a start. That's a start that Democrats can build from. And the more deals and compromises that Democrats can successfully make, the more trust Democrats can establish, and the more compromises the Democrats and moderate Republicans can make, and the more compromises and deals they can make. So a half loaf is indeed much better than one. No, it's not. A half loaf is indeed much better than none. So take it. Now, Democrats need a massive outreach effort to more conservative voters of all ethnicities. 47% of voters went for Trump, and you had a net loss of 9 seats in swing districts. And it wasn't because your policies weren't progressive enough. It's because many Americans fear excessive government intrusion in their lives. What voters want in New York City or LA or Portland is going to be different in many ways than what people in smaller or more rural places want. you're going to have to get out there with more conservatives. You have to get out there and meet with them and make your case, but to do so in a non-threatening way that lets them know we aren't going to try and get you fired for accidentally using the wrong pronoun with someone at work. And we're not going to try and jack your income taxes up to 70%. And we're not going to make fun of your religious beliefs. Yeah, that's bad. And if you're doing it, cut it out. We're not going to talk down to you or look down on you if you don't have a college degree, because that's elitist and it sucks and it's ugly. And people who do that don't have anything good to say about you. So the people that do that, stop it. All right? Because people resent you for it and they're right to. Democrats, show that you are willing to listen carefully to conservative voters' issues and concerns and to think seriously about how Democrats can help them. All right? Most of them, Democrats, you're not going to convince these conservatives, right? People's political beliefs are incredibly stubborn. But Democrats, you will reach some. You will reach some conservatives, especially more moderate conservatives and swing voters. And your good faith efforts over time, deliberate, sustained good faith efforts, will create some goodwill for you as well. Now, not everyone will appreciate it, but those that take a sincere, kind gesture sincerely will. And that makes a difference. Maybe all the difference in the world that you'll need to claim the consistent electoral victories that have for so long eluded Democrats. Now, we need each other. When I say we, I mean Democrats and Republicans. We need each other. And we're inextricably linked. Lots of Democrats in red states, right? 33% voted for Biden in deep red Idaho. And lots of Republicans in blue states. In deep blue Massachusetts, 33% voted for Trump. We have no choice, really, but to take each other into consideration. We need each other, and we cannot properly coexist or work together if we treat each other like enemies. We annoy each other, we get on each other's nerves, but we are all part of the American family, and we need to treat each other as such, with respect, patience, and love. Don't believe me? Go ask Jesus. Now, forget about abolishing the Electoral College, okay? Democrats, I know you want the Electoral College gone, understandably so, because it gives greater proportional weight to voters in more rural, less populated, more conservative states. But conservative states are never, ever going to support a constitutional amendment to give up this electoral advantage, which would guarantee many more Democratic successes for the presidency. Yes, it is unfair, and the Electoral College flies in the face of the democratic principle of one person, one vote. But it's a package deal, baked into the cake from the very beginning, baked into our Constitution. We couldn't even get a deal to become a country without it. That was one of the necessary compromises that happened during the founding of our country and the writing of our Constitution. And the reasons for it still exist today. Yes, the Electoral College was indeed beneficial for slave owners, but also, setting slavery aside for a moment, it was also beneficial for rural people who simply do not want to be dominated by much larger numbers of voters from cities, which is why they have no intention now of ever getting rid of the Electoral College. Democrats are much better off countering the Electoral College by using the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which 15 states and the District of Columbia have already joined. Now, these states and D.C. have basically agreed to award their electoral votes to the winner of the national U.S. popular vote for president, for whichever candidate. Whoever gets that national popular vote number, they get the electoral votes from those states. And enough states join, it will greatly weaken the Electoral College's ability to prevent the popular vote candidate from attaining the office of the president. Hey, like I said, I'm not crazy about it either. I think regarding the Electoral College, I do think there are a lot of other ways to even the playing field for rural voters without the Electoral College. But the EC, it is here to stay, at least for a very, very long time. So find a way to work around it and save your energies for more promising and urgent efforts. Now, been a lot of criticism of a lot of folks, most especially President Trump. Let us now, for a brief moment, let us give President Trump his due before we send him off. He did pass tax cuts. Like him or hate him, he passed tax cuts, and most of you did get some kind of money in your pocket from him. So this year, it blew up our deficit by $2 trillion, but it could backfire on us and probably will. But you did get some cash from him. So we acknowledge that. Thank you. Thank you for the loan, which you took out, that we have to pay back. Stimulus, he did, they passed some stimulus bills, not enough. We need another one now. But they have passed stimulus bills for business and for citizens. It's kept a lot of us out of trouble up to this point, somewhat, but lots of people are teetering on homelessness and running out of money. So we are behind and we're running out. We need another one. But thank you for the stimulus bills that you did sign. Deregulation, right? He's cut a lot of regulations, especially environmental laws. Over 100 different environmental laws are set to be repealed. 80 of them already repealed. 20 more to go. Now, if you're conservative, you may think this is great, right? If you're progressive, you may think this is wild, or environmentalist, you're going to think this is wildly reckless, right? But either way, leaving aside the argument of whether these should be cut, and if it's like, he did it. And conservatives like it. That's what he wanted. He gave them what they wanted. Deregulation of a lot of different laws. All right. Judiciary, obviously, Republicans very happy with that, right? He came through for you guys. He gave you 3 Supreme Court justices. That's a massive win. That's huge. And part of it has nothing to do with Trump, but just the fact that he's here, right? When the spots come open, when RBG passes away, right? That he's here at the time, but he got it done. Give him credit for it. And all those conservative justices that are on the bench now, on the federal bench, that conservatives has been salivating for years, he did it. Okay? He gets stuff done. He's an SOB, there's no question about it, but he's an SOB that gets stuff done. He may not know what he's doing. He may not be qualified to be doing what he's doing, but he gets stuff done, right? The stuff he gets done may end up backfiring and be worse, make things worse than before. But there can be no denying Donald Trump does indeed get stuff done. And let us not deny the fact that Mr. President Trump, has some big ass balls. Now, I do not like this man. Do not like him one bit. All right. But I'm not afraid to say that the guy's got guts, and he's not afraid to say what he thinks. And, Trump supporters like that. So let's get him some credit for that. And you know what? He sent a strong message to illegal immigrants and Muslims that they're not wanted, which apparently a lot of conservative voters wanted that too, right? So he wanted that, and you did it for him. So you came through for your constituency again. You also very clearly told China to stick it, and a lot of our other trading partners too. This led to a lot of unnecessary trade wars and problems and increased import prices. But you did tell them where to go. And your people, the GOP, a lot of your supporters were wanting that, and you gave it to them, and you gave it to them in spades. You don't always realize the consequences of what your actions are going to be, right? But Trump does do what he say he's going to do for his constituents. All right, give him credit. Give him credit for that. Now we're almost out of Afghanistan. Give him credit for that. He's pulling us out. Now, there will only be about 2,500 U.S. soldiers left after this next withdrawal. There's about 5,000 there now. We're going to draw down to about 2,500. This rapid withdrawal could really potentially allow al-Qaeda to regroup and for the Taliban to back down on its promises for peace within the Afghan government. It is potentially a reckless withdrawal. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we want them out of there, but do it the right way. Otherwise, it backfires and makes things worse than before. But again, let us give him credit for the things he has done. President Trump signed the First Step Act, which is a major criminal justice reform bill, all right, which was a bipartisan criminal justice bill signed by Democrats and Republicans. And Trump signed it as well. Got to give him credit. He didn't tear it up. He signed it. All right. And this is an improvement for criminal justice reform and getting people out of prison who shouldn't be there. Now, this likely helped Trump get that 6% bump with black men. And Biden's past support for mandatory minimum sentencing back in the 90s probably also contributed to these black men voting for Trump as well. Now, let's also give him his due. Trump is funny and entertaining in a very rude, offensive sort of way, but he is so unpredictable and obnoxious. It draws your attention, right? But he really is ridiculous. And I can see why you like him, because you got a lot out of the deal. Transactionally, it was worth it to you, right? And because he's got guts and you like his style, he's always got some comeback or some, quick burn or something. But he really is a sad and ridiculous person, meaning he's worthy of ridicule for his plethora of unacceptable offenses, which the GOP has just heartily accepted. Let's give him credit, though. He's a great showman. He's a great salesman. He's a great entertainer, much more so than a businessman, where he's arguably been a repeated failure. See Trump's businesses, his 6 business bankruptcies. See him settling suits out of court over 100 times, or his over $1 billion in debt. If you have any further questions about his failure at business. So Trump did do some good things. And he did a lot of things that many conservatives, or let's say many Republicans and some conservatives like, but he's just simply not fit for the role. Now, I'm not going through the list again of why he's unfit. See many of our previous podcasts for that if you must. It is enough to say that he behaves in ways that you would never allow your child to act, and is actually, with the help of way too many Republicans, willing to endanger our democratic republic because he doesn't want to admit he lost the election. Now, he knows he lost, but he's unwilling to admit it. And he knows, knowing he's lost all interest in doing the job, as he plays golf every day. Now, he's ready to go now, and he's going, too. But he's going to make as big a stink as possible first, because that's the type of person that he is. A sore loser and a bad sport. Now, though I do admittedly think that President Trump is an awful person, I don't hate President Trump, and I never have. And I strongly discourage any of you from hating him, or anyone for that matter. He's arguably one of the worst presidents we've ever had, with perhaps Andrew Johnson or James Buchanan offering some potential stiff competition there. Herbert Hoover was bad too. He blew the response to the Depression, but he was also a highly competent administrator who was not nearly as bad as he's been portrayed. He just tried to use that GOP austerity approach at the wrong time. Now, Johnson and Buchanan were both strikingly bad. Johnson opposed Civil War reconstruction. He was against granting citizenship for former slaves, and he was impeached in the House of Representatives, but saved by 1 vote in the Senate. Buchanan, well, he just really hated being president. But Trump's modern executive power and access to technology make him far more destructive. So arguably, Trump is the worst U.S. president ever. But let's not be too hard on him. He could be suffering from narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathic tendencies. He exhibits many, if not all, of the classic symptoms, and it seems to have many of its roots going back to his childhood and how he was raised. He was a spoiled rich kid who never got raised right and was allowed to do whatever he wanted without consequence because his family had the money, the influence, the power, and could just buy people off. Still his favorite approach. He was corrupted from the start. He probably never had a chance to develop into a proper human being. For that, I feel sad for him and his family, and what their lives might have been like had Trump's father and mother had chosen a different way. And I think of this and I feel sorrow for him. And Trump may have committed crimes, and if so, he must be investigated and prosecuted for them like any criminal, if the evidence supports prosecution. But it must be done transparently, by the letter, and without vindictiveness, or you're just going to unnecessarily exacerbate tensions with Republicans instead of moving forward. A lot of GOP are going to be screaming about QAnon and the deep state, which is ridiculous, but you don't need to add any fuel to the fire by making it seem personal or overly vengeful. Remember, reality check, Trump is bad news, but 47% of voters liked him enough to want him back. Their hero may not necessarily deserve it, but treat Trump with decency, transparency, civility, and due process for all to see. That much easier to destroy the bogus claims that are likely to flow from his supporters. And how much more credibility will Democrats have when they live up demonstrably to their ideals? Lastly, I'll just say this. There is sometimes a time to quit. Most of the time, when we say never give up, we are right, but not always. Most of the time, we're rewarded for our tenacity, never giving up until the task is successfully complete and hopefully done with excellence. And when you must fight for your life or your family or your country, never surrender is the order of the day. But there are times when it is best to relent, to give in, to surrender. Not many, but there are some. Like when you lose the Democratic vote to be president. When a clear majority of voters within the Electoral College decisively voted for someone else, and where voter fraud is virtually non-existent, it is time to concede. It is time to put down the fight. Set your ego, pride, and disappointment aside and honor the votes of the majority of your nation's citizens, lest you risk plunging the country into an entirely unnecessary constitutional crisis, from which we may never recover. Our democratic republic is just far too precious to be tarnished by a man who refuses to be a good sport and accept when he has lost. Mr. President, you have honor within you, sir. Find that honor and concede your loss in the presidential election. Well, those are my key takeaways from the 2020 elections. And that's it for this episode of The Breakdown. I hope you got a lot of good stuff out of this episode to think about, and that we all, try a lot harder to work together and to respect each other, and regardless of personal political differences, because it is cliche to say that we are all in this together for a reason, because it's true. We are in this together. And as the challenges of the 21st century mount against us, we will only overcome them if we cooperate, compromise, and work together to develop the practical solutions to meet these challenges. And going around embittered, pissed off, and resentful of those with whom you disagree is no way to live. It's no way to live a happy life. It's no way to live a well-functioning life. It sucks. So just don't do it. Do your very best to be a good friend, a good parent, a good spouse, a good neighbor, a good boss, a good coworker, a good citizen, and look out for each other. Don't assume the worst about people just because their ways are different from yours. Give people more of a chance and be more forgiving, because we all need that. We all do. So on our next episode, it's going to be a very special season finale. That's right. We're wrapping it up for 2020. Thank goodness. What an exhausting year this has been. I'm sure a few of you might agree. But we have a special breakdown holiday season treat planned just for you with a mashup of different interesting topics that I'm sure you'll find interesting, entertaining, and enlightening. I hope you will join me for this final episode of the season, after which we're going to be taking a nice hiatus for the holidays to relax, recharge, and start planning for Season 2 of The Breakdown, beginning in January 2021. I very much look forward to our next discussion on the season finale. Until then, take good care of yourselves and each other. I'll talk to you soon.